the first presentation, I am pleasure to introduce to Rebecca Waits that has overcome many difficulties to come here because he took off yesterday a flight from Brussels with the hurricane in Central Europe. But fortunately is with us, and we are very happy to come with her. Okay, Rebecca Waits is co-founder of Bantani Education. Bantani Education is a non-profit company, European company that is very involved with the development of this entrepreneurship concept through her participation, its participation in the development from the inception phase of the EntreComp framework. Please try to understand which are all the competencies that should be considered with entrepreneurship. Okay, Rebecca you have the biography of Rebecca on the web page. You can consult that. She has developed and supported creative entrepreneurial learning policy and practice, and I think that we will have the opportunity to learn many things of her presentation. I prefer that to give the talk to Rebecca. And thank you very much for your participation again, and we are ready to listen. Thank you.
So, there we go. I'm coming up here in order to make sure that you see me, you see the presentation, I can really well see you. Edmundo, thank you so much for having me for the invitation. Indeed, my name is Rebecca Waits, and I am a co-founder of Bantani Education. As you correctly said, Bantani Education is a European non-profit. We work in various EU projects across pretty much the entire continent on different areas, a lot or all of them in the area of entrepreneurship education. And as you said correctly, we've been heavily involved in the development of the European Entrepreneurship Competence Framework that's called EntreComp. We have been involved in EntreComp since its inception, and now we're part of a consortium that is developing a user guide to this framework. I'm going to talk about the framework in a second, and I'm going to talk about EntreComp into Action, which is the user guide also. Allow me first to just give you an idea about what we're doing. So we do work in different areas that I've shortened in policy, projects, people, and partnerships. The policy area development that we are working on, for example, is the EntreComp framework. The projects that we're working on is different EU-funded projects, all concerned with the skills development of entrepreneurial competencies, which we very much, and in light of EntreComp, see as transversal life skills. People refers to different communities of practice that we are running. For example, for the European Commission's School Education Gateway collaborative space on entrepreneurial learning, which connects not just teachers in the field or in various fields that are teaching entrepreneurial competencies, but also practitioners, policymakers, project managers. And partnerships, we are building various partnerships with, amongst other, e-tech or ed-tech companies, one of them being LoopMe, a tool that I'm going to talk about in a moment as well, that uses or that teaches entrepreneurial skills through technology, amongst others. I'm going to today talk about EntreComp into Action. That's the name of the talk. EntreComp into Action is also this user guide. So I want to say up front that everything I'm going to say now will shortly be available in a few months in this user guide that will be published on the European Commission and Joint Research Center, the think tank of the European Commission's website, as well as publicized by us, obviously. So the question of the talk today is how to put EntreComp into action. All the examples I'm going to give you, if there's something that someone you want to contact, something's not quite clear yet, obviously I'm open for questions, but all of this will be available in this booklet. First and foremost about EntreComp. Can I just get a short sign of hands. Who of you has heard about the Entercom framework already? Yes or no? I know that a couple of people at least have, because you are involved in an EU-funded project as well, that's based on Entercom. In short, Entercom is a framework that defines what does it mean to be entrepreneurial, or what does an entrepreneurial competence really mean. It is a very comprehensive framework. We can see it here. That's a first illustration. A framework that effectively has over 400 learning outcomes across a progression level. So there's 8 different levels for 15 different competencies that are clustered in 3 competence areas: resources, interaction, and ideas and opportunities. I want to make a point in saying that the Entercom framework is developed by the European Commission, but it is very adaptable. It is, as I said, very comprehensive, but it is made for you to be used and made to fit your purpose. And I want to also just quickly go into kind of laying the foundation and help us understand what does it mean to be entrepreneurial. How does the Entercom framework define entrepreneurship competencies? Entrepreneurship is defined as the capacity to act upon opportunities and ideas to create value for others. So entrepreneurship is something that can happen not just in a business environment by setting up an SME, a business, or any other company, for example. It can be any sort of social value, so it can be the sports club round our corner. It can be cultural value. It can have a social value and be a social enterprise, for example. I really just want to make this a point that we are clear and that we are understanding that entrepreneurship is really a transversal skill. So it's something that we learn now in order, as Edmundo said correctly, to be able to address problems further down the line that we might not know yet will be a problem at some point, that we have the skills like communication skills, like leadership skills, like civic competencies that allow us to be a good citizen today and tomorrow. Just to give an illustration, the Entercom framework, as I said, is made up of 15 different competencies, which are clustered in 3 different areas: ideas and opportunities, interaction, and resources. Each of those areas, so this is the interaction area, for example, has 5 competencies. This one, for example, is taking the initiative. And for each of those competencies, different threads have been developed in order to really be specific. What does it mean to take the initiative? And what does it mean to take the initiative at a foundation level, for example, as opposed to an experienced masterclass kind of level? The area ideas and opportunities, for example, one of the competencies is creativity. There is the competence vision as well, for example. And again, all of these are broken down into more distinct threads. And for the resources action, one of the competencies, for example, is being able to deal with resources. How do I find resources? How do I use resources? For example, one of the skills is ethical and financial understanding. I want to talk now a bit more about the value of using Entercom, and I'm getting into the part of my presentation which talks about the usage, the use cases, how you can make Entercom happen, how you can teach, train, foster, build entrepreneurial competencies. There's, roughly speaking, 5 different areas in which Entercom can be used, and they are really broad. So what I really want to show with this is that Entercom can be used across the board, and it doesn't have to be taught within a business school environment, for example. The first area is influencing policy. So for example, curriculum development. How do I make sure that my pupils at school, for example, learn today to succeed in the work environment of tomorrow? Education and training, that's both formal education, including primary school up until higher education, but also vet education, for example, that's practice-based or more practice-based. Outside formal education, this could be within youth work. So entrepreneurial competencies and civic competencies, for example, are very closely linked. Entercom has a lot of these competencies within its framework, so that's a part where we can use Entercom. With startups and entrepreneurs, naturally, we have talked about the business environment. Entrepreneurial competencies are the foundation to building up your own startup, your own business, your own company for that matter. And recruiting and managing human resources, a lot of the competencies that I have named as an example, for example, are really intercultural competencies as well. So working with others, managing resources, how do I convince someone to follow the path that I am foreseeing for my company, for my venture, for example. Tips to get started using Entercom. So now I really just want to show you what a lot of great organizations or projects have done and how they so far have used the Entercom framework. The framework has only been published in June 2016, so barely 18 months ago, which means it's very, very new. And not many people have yet taken it up, but there's a couple of really great examples out there that we really want to showcase and inspire you to take up. Use the Entercom framework for your own work, for your own development, for example. The first tip to get started in using Entercom is create shared understanding. So you might know this as well. There's a lot of discussion on an academic level, but also outside of academia that asks, what does it mean to be entrepreneurial? What is entrepreneurship? How do I define entrepreneurship? It's a discussion that's been going on for a while, and it's probably not going to stop for another long while as well. The Entercom framework can, in that regard, be a standard-setting definition or a standard-setting vision across Europe and beyond. There's a lot of projects that have used the Entercom definition in order to know what is it that we're really talking about. And then from there went on to mobilize different user groups, engage users or engage citizens, engage business partners, policymakers, etc., inspire action, and have relied on the clear and the consistent approach that was developed as part of an 18-month consultation process, so with a lot of different stakeholders, in order to get to an understanding of what Entercom is, which competencies are defined as entrepreneur, and what do they mean at which progression level. So just to give you a couple of examples, this is the University of Turku in Finland using Entercom across a multidisciplinary university. So you have the School of Medicine, you have the School of Business, you have the arts, you have the language schools, for example. They sat together in order to understand indeed what Edmundo said, how do we need to teach now in order to make sure that my medicine students, my future doctors, have the set of skills that they need in order to succeed? How do my language students have the set of skills that they need to succeed in order to, for example, work as a freelancer, but also in order to just do business on a daily basis? The Succeed project, led by the University of Coventry in the UK, has used the framework mid-project. It's an EU-funded project, and what they were looking at is trying to understand what does it mean to have social competencies, and what does it mean to spot ideas and opportunities. They found that when the Entercom framework was published midway through their project, it was a really good standard-setting definition, and they started building up the rest of their project around this Entercom definition and helping people learn these skills. This is a slide from a workshop with students. The Southeast European Center of Entrepreneurial Learning, headquartered in Croatia, has hosted a hundreds of people worthy big conference on entrepreneurial learning with Southeastern European and Western Balkan countries. And what they did at that conference is they had a workshop with 100 different students, and they were trying to find out, the students, the kids themselves, they were trying to find out what skills does my teacher need to have in order to teach me how I should be living my life and what I should be learning now in order to, as I said, succeed in the future. So the framework they used, for example, is with a very simple, very kid-friendly, emoji-based approach that says, yes, this is a skill that I really love and I really, really think my teacher ought to be having in order to be able to teach me, or, well, this is a skill that's not very good. The second approach, find the right competencies and find the right competency level. The Entercom framework, when it is being transposed into practice, doesn't always mean that you have to teach all competencies across the board. There's no one competency that's more important than another, for example. So sometimes it just makes a lot of sense for you to get started thinking, what is it that I want to achieve? What competencies fall under this objective, and how do I get there? Again, a couple of examples how other people have done this. Define your audience. The iWomen Academy, for example, is an academy where unemployed women, refugee women, women in minorities are being trained through the medium of radio. They're doing media work together, basically. And that helps them build their self-confidence. And that's the core competencies that the iWomen Academy is looking to boost. So they really know where their audience is, they know what their goal is, and they go on to prioritize that competence and help other people, or help these women develop the competence. The women's organization in Leeds in the UK, again, is a program that helps women specifically. They do give different classes. A one-day class, for example, once per month, that again focuses on self-confidence, self-esteem across different progression levels. So as I said, Entercom has got, for each of the 15 competences, 8 progression levels from foundation to expert. So what they're doing is they have mapped their workshop across the across the progression level in order to help the women understand where are they at, where do they want to get to, and what training path might it take in order to build their self-esteem. Adapt, adapt, adapt. I'm saying it again. Adapt, adapt, adapt. I really, really, really want to make a point in saying that the Entercom model as it stands is very theoretical. It has been developed to be theoretical. It is not wanting or trying to be a practical tool. You are invited, or you need to take the framework and really make it fit for your purpose, make it fit for whatever you're trying to achieve. We're going to hear a bit more from Edmundo as well about the Entercom for All project in a moment. I just want to show you a couple of ways how other organizations and projects have taken the framework, have adapted it, and what does it mean to adapt. First and foremost, really simple, translate the framework. The framework is available in a couple of languages, and it's continuously being translated by the European Commission's Joint Research Centre, so the people behind the development, the consultation, the parents, basically, of the framework. But it's also just been taken on by other organizations. This translation into Greek, for example, wasn't in any way set into the realm by the Joint Research Centre. It was taken by an organization, made fit to the Greek context, so it is available in the Greek language. That's the really simplest way to start adapting. The second is, this is an example from the University of Huddersfield, again in the UK. The University of Huddersfield has an undergrad entrepreneurship program whereby their students don't go on a classical placement year into a company in order to learn on the job. What they're doing is they are shadowing SMEs, for example, or they're invited to just go and set up their own business during this placement year in the third year. In order to help understand and help measure which skills the students are building throughout this year, the University of Huddersfield is using an EdTech tool called LoopMe, which is very much based on reflection. So whilst I'm, as a student, going out, doing my thing, learning competencies, and I use this to reflect, the University of Huddersfield has taken the Entercom skills here and kind of made them more practical for me to understand as like an 18-year-old English person. What does it actually mean? Self-awareness and self-efficacy is really big words, and it's not always easily understood. So what they've done is they've broken this down into a whole lot more approachable language that then makes it really easy to understand which are the skills that my students are learning and where are they at. So taking the initiative and learning through experience, for example, has become out of my comfort zone. If I'm doing something like picking up the phone and making a sales call, a cold call, that's a skill I'm learning. It puts me out of my comfort zone. That's something I, as an 18-year-old, can understand, but my teachers understand really clearly what does it translate into. EARS, the European Affairs Recruitment Specialists, they are, again, a Brussels-based organization who work in HR and training. What they're doing is they're recruiting for European-based associations, like a managing director, for example, or any sort of other senior executive. For them, the understanding of the European competence framework is really useful because it helps them find the right people for the right positions. So it helps them find someone who might be entrepreneurial, who's really spotting opportunities, going after something, and that might be the right person needed within a specific team setting. So for EARS, we call it an inspirational idea that we have amid the 70 case studies in the Entrecom user guide, is really EARS would like to see a tool that helps them, okay, how do I have some sort of questionnaire, for example, that allows me to hire someone who has skills X, Y, and Z, and that is really becoming towards an intrapreneur in the roles that we're recruiting for. And lastly, Align. This is the EU-funded Youth Start project. The Youth Start project teaches entrepreneurial skills through challenges. So a bit like what Edmundo said earlier, not in a competition approach, but a very everyday basic, okay, how do I address this challenge? Again, this project preceded the publication of the Entrecom framework. However, what the project organizers have done now that the framework is out, and they have been part of the consultation process as well beforehand, is they've mapped whatever they're doing against the Entrecom framework, which now helps everyone really communicate outside of schools environments, for example, help communicate with policymakers, help communicate with business leaders. What does it mean to be entrepreneurial? What does it mean that we are teaching the skill vision, for example? So when I say my first point was adapt, 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 the top tip I have is that Entrecom is not a fixed tool. If I want you to take home 2 messages today, this is one of them. Understand your starting point. This is seemingly very easy and very basic, but similar to what I said about the CSIL workshop with students, it is really important not for students to just know which skills they're developing. It is important for the teacher to be aware, where are my strengths and where are the areas that I might want to improve further in order to then go on and do the teaching, the fostering. So understanding your starting point is a point I've really taken into this presentation as well to just reiterate it. And there's a really cute little tool that was developed by a vet teacher on her own accord, which is what we refer to as the Entrecom Giant. So I don't know if you can see this, but it's quite cute. What she's done is she's taking the different entrepreneurial competencies and put them according to different areas of where our body is. So we have in the extremities, for example, the more practical skills, like, as I said, working with others, taking the initiative, going out and grabbing resources, understanding of ethical and sustainable thinking, for example. And then the creativity and vision, for example, might be sitting more in the head. So this visualization is something that she works with in her teacher training, for example, and helps the teachers understand where is their starting point. Design practical entrepreneurial experiences. And here we're really getting into the nitty-gritty, the how do I actually go about teaching entrepreneurship, or how do I go about fostering a set of entrepreneurial skills? There's a lot of really, really, really great tools out there who have already started to map ideas for the classroom, for example, against the Entrecom framework. I just want to introduce a couple. First one is the iLink project. Horizon 2020 EU-funded project that has over 65 learning activities that teachers can use in order to foster entrepreneurial competencies. They call that EntreLearn, and basically all the ideas, how can I teach vision, how can I teach creativity in my classroom? It's really easy for teachers to just go to the vision competence and then find ideas. What kind of exercises can I do in the classroom? What kind of maybe project-based work can I do inside and outside of my classroom? The tool is also available in a couple of languages already, and it's further being translated. So it is really very, very good for across Europe, and I'm pretty sure it's available in Spanish already as well. This is the SimVentures e-learning tool, again an EdTech tool. It's from the UK, that helps within a classroom, for example, students to define a business plan. And it isn't very dry, it just doesn't let you calculate whatever inputs and outputs you're having. It is a tool that actually you can take links like URLs, you can take pictures, put them within this software, and then it comes out as a really neatly designed website and presentation, which then you can use in a format like we are, for example, for pitching. So the tool itself already has a couple of defined Anticom criteria. It starts teaching, as I said, not just the understanding of how do I deal with finances, for example, but also the understanding of what communication skills does it need for me to be able to pitch successfully, for example. This is, again, one of the, what we refer to as inspirational ideas. iKindoo is a Belgian, apologies. Just have to go forward again. iKindoo is a Belgian non-profit, or a Belgian consultancy, that focuses again on culture. It focuses on the HR sector. So how do I put a team together that comes newly together, for example, in the situation of mergers and acquisitions, and how do I help my team build a team culture? Because you probably all know, I know it, team culture, hands down, beats strategy. If you don't have a team that's working together well, you can try the best strategy in the world, you only ever be so successful. So the iKindoo tool fits within the iKindoo idea that we're having, fits within the developing organizations tool, whereby we are, again, we can use matching algorithms, the way that you maybe know them from love websites, where you're trying to find your partner and see, okay, what kind of people do fit together? If I have someone who's a great visionary, I probably also want to have someone who's really good at organizations, at structure, a COO kind of person that helps me put these visions into practice. Assess and appraise. This is pretty straightforward. I mean, we can't just talk about teaching, fostering, building entrepreneurial competencies in whatever way. We also have to understand what kind of impact do I have? How do I know if my students, for example, have learned what I want them to learn? Again, there's different opportunities that are already mapped to or working with the Anticom framework. The University of Worcester in the UK, the business school, I believe in particular, has, for example, taken the Anticom framework and developed a bit of a self-assessment questionnaire for their students. So all their incoming business students at the beginning of the year now sit down, go through their self-assessment questionnaire, which is based on Anticom, in order to understand these are my strengths and these are the areas of work that I want to do. So the Anticom framework, or the Anticom tool that has been developed by the university, actually helps the teachers understand very focused, where do I need to put my resources, what do I need to train really well, where are my students good, or where can I maybe even pair students in order to help and understand peer learning. This is a screenshot of the LoopMe tool that we've seen. So LoopMe falls into reflect on learning and demonstrating progress. The LoopMe tool was developed by Chalmers University of Technology, or as a spin-out from Chalmers University in Sweden, and it teaches entrepreneurial skills through doing things and through reflecting. The example that I mentioned earlier, whereby I, as a business student, maybe pick up a phone, do a cold call, and then learn how to handle or how to cope with uncertainty, ambiguity, and risk, which is an entrepreneurial competence. This is something that would really happen through LoopMe. So my teacher, for example, asks me to put myself out of my comfort zone to do this cold call. I reflect on the tool, or within the tool, I reflect on the activity, and I learn through the emotion. You're educators to an extent. I think you know we learn by head, hand, and heart. And the heart approach is really what LoopMe uses here, the emotion. What have I learned from this experience? And what will I take away from it for good in the long term? LoopMe is also an opportunity to thus demonstrate progress. So if my students obviously at the end of the year know, okay, I'm more able to deal with problems, I'm more able to deal with ambiguity and risk because I have gone through these processes of not just doing one sales call, but maybe doing 3, for example, we can see, again, mapped against the Anticom framework and mapped against the skills that are in Anticom, or the progression levels as well that are in Anticom, I can demonstrate progress. Evidence impact. So you can see we're nearing in terms of, like, I've gone through my teaching progress, for example, I've gone through my IT processes, for example, we're nearing the end here. The evidencing impact is about recognizing skills or demonstrating impact. A couple of examples, the University of Wales Trinity St. David, for example, has developed an EdD, an education doctorate, that is exclusively based on the Intercom framework. So the people behind this EdD were involved as well in the consultation process. They've been working with the talk for quite a long time, so that's why the EdD, the degree program, is basically launched already. And it is specifically for teachers. It helps teachers understand how do I teach entrepreneurial competencies, and puts them into, like, gives them this added research aspect. So to an extent also makes them action researchers. And this is a screenshot from another project that we as Pantani are working in as well, for example. Again, we're using the LoopMe tool as well because, as I said, they are part of our partners. We are actually a partners in Italy and us. We are working together on analyzing the impact, or trying to really get more information, impact about skills building for the Erasmus program, Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs. So as a young entrepreneur myself, for example, I have the opportunity to go into a different country, be embedded with a host entrepreneur in their organization and learn from them. And they might be learning, obviously. They're learning from me as well because I have different skills. I pitch in new ideas, for example. The Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs program is, in its KPIs, in its impact assessment, very much focused on things like partnerships that were built, new organizations that came out, so very like quantitative measures, for example. What we're trying to do is really understand, okay, if I'm a new entrepreneur and I've spent 4 months in Sweden, what have I really learned? Which of the skills have I learned or have I fostered in order to become a successful entrepreneur myself? This is it so far from my side. I think we're going to hear from Edmundo for a moment to learn more about the Intercom for All project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. This is the first dissemination action that we are doing about a new project that we are beginning now. So the idea is to adapt the Intercom framework, is try the opportunity to take the advantages of this European framework and to be useful for our target groups. Our target groups are young graduates, women, and teachers and trainers. This is the consortium that we have configured for this project. We are coordinating the project. It's participated the Obuda University, CC of Spain, Innova Consulting, Matera Hub. The main objectives for this project is try to enhance the entrepreneurship competences. And our proposal try to overcome the traditional barriers to exploit the open educational resources, like the interoperability between the platforms, the discoverability of resources. And the other one is filtering the big volume of data that we can extract into the social network as Twitter. And the main objectives, we tried in the first phase, we tried to develop an innovative method to evaluate individual issues learning needs and to elaborate, to develop training paths according to the levels of the different competencies that is part of our adaptation of the framework. And the other one is the provide of open educational resources, recommend open educational resources using different technologies as social network analysis. Okay, this is the experience that I wanted to present as an example of the proposal that we have in order to adapt the Intercom framework. Okay, so now if you want to make any questions to Rebecca, do you have any questions?
Say one thing first. maybe I can just say one thing before, in order to really close. So you might know, or you might hear it for the first time now, the Entrecomp user guide, Entrecomp for Introduction to Entrecomp that I've been talking about, is going to be available as I said, in a couple of months, so towards the end of February, beginning of March. But I would recommend, for example, is that you maybe follow us on Twitter. Entrecomp Engage is the hashtag, so you'll be the first ones to hear when the user guide is available, and then you can also get in contact if you want to learn more about one of the projects that I've been presenting today, for example. And indeed, if you have any questions, shoot.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. My question is, are there other competitive entrepreneurship, other competitive frameworks around? If this is the case, how does this compare to others? What are the differences? Or can you highlight a little bit in comparison with other frameworks?
Oh, sorry. Absolutely, indeed. There are absolutely there are other entrepreneurial competence frameworks or frameworks that are starting or have started to discuss what does it mean to be entrepreneurial and codify the competences. The Success project that I mentioned earlier, they set out to do something for two specific competencies, for example. Then Entrecomp kind of came along basically, and they were building on this understanding. This EU-based framework is actually exported way beyond the EU already. For example, the European Training Foundation, which works with the EU's neighboring countries, pre-accession countries, the Ukraine, for example, they are working with this framework a lot already. So the framework's been being pushed. I know that the northern Mediterranean countries, for example, I believe it's Tunisia, if I'm not mistaken, they're also to start look at this framework. The UN, for example, knows about the framework as well. They've been looking at it from a vet point of view very recently at a conference in Chile in December. So I think that because the framework tries to be standard setting, it's definitely going to be applicable way more outside of the continent as well. And what we're basically all trying to do is put it on its way and make it the go-to framework, the same way that we are effectively measuring language abilities in the languages framework, like my C2 English or B1 Spanish, for example.
Are they in the US also?
About frameworks specifically, I can't tell you one right now, for example, but there are a lot of initiatives going on, absolutely. I have no doubt about that.
Rebecca, which is the degree of flexibility of Entrecomp framework? Because you insist on the idea to adapt it, but if you try to adapt it, even you can change many things, and the final outcomes of your product or of your framework is not exactly or doesn't meet the criteria or the final proposal of Entrecomp. I don't know if you change competencies, even the levels of to assess the competencies.
I think the framework is quite flexible for a really long way. I wouldn't per se go as far and say you'd go about rearranging the progression levels, for example. But when I say adapt, I think what's really important is to understand as well that the framework, as I said, has like 442 learning objectives. So if you ever were to give that to any sort of university lecturer or teacher, they'd be like, yeah, no, this is too much, I can't deal with this. If I were to have to assess against this framework, every single one of my students, that's not going to happen. There's a project that similar to Entrecomp for All that we as Bantini are part of in a consortium, for example, called Entrecomp for Teachers. So what we're doing just as an example of adaptation, what we are doing is we're taking this framework and we're just going to take it and break it down to teachers and say, as I said, the starting point is yourself. What do I need to know? What do I know already? And where do I want to go, for example? So the idea is also not to say every teacher needs to go from one certain level. So you all need to be level 7, for example, when it comes to vision or creativity as a competence, but the idea is to progress. So wherever your individual starting point is to just take an effort and make sure that you move further on. So to your original question, I think the framework's quite adaptable, but I personally probably wouldn't go as far as rearranging the progression levels, for example.
Okay. Any additional question? Okay.